Interpreting cross-cultural research. I want you to imagine. Let's say a study was done in the United States that looked at students in the Midwest compared to students in the South, comparing them on standardized math scores. And what this study found was that students in the Midwest performed worse on standard math tests compared to students in the South. And what they concluded from their study was that Midwest culture causes students to have worse math scores. Now, you'd probably look at them and go, no, that's crazy. Why would you think that? Now, this is what we could call as an example of a cultural attribution fallacy, where we say, based on a study, that culture was the causal reason for differences that were found, when we didn't measure aspects of that culture and only looked at demographics, just looked at students from X compared to students from Y. Now, when we interpret research, we have to really be thinking about other reasons why we might have found differences or similarities in the groups we're looking at. And one key factor to think about that's very central to this idea is what's known as the third variable problem. Basically, what the third variable problem is it's the idea that when you find an association between two variables, let's say A and B, that there is possibly a third confounding variable that leads to a mistaken attribution that A caused B, when it could be that A's association with C is really the reason why we see differences in B. This might be confusing with the whole A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So let's put this into an example, right? So the example that applies to us in cross-cultural psychology is often the variable we're looking at is a cultural context, whether it is a country or a region of people, or however we are defining culture here. We're looking at how culture is associated with some kind of difference, some kind of psychological outcome. Now, when we talk about culture as a package and unpacking culture, what we're referring to is this third variable problem, meaning that cultures are made up of many different pieces, right? Different norms, different values, different beliefs, practices, foods, context, right? So when we say Chinese people are different from American people or people in the United States, there is sometimes an implication there that being Chinese causes that difference. But if Chinese culture is this big package, then you don't really know what about being Chinese might lead to those differences. Or what about being someone from the United States causes those differences. So this unpackaging of cultures allows us to think about different third variables here, right? Different reasons or mechanisms for why we might see a difference. So let's take this a step further. Let's look at a hypothetical study, totally made up. Let's say in this study, we found that Italians are more open to new experiences compared to Koreans. Now, what we might assume, or what this person who's doing the study might say is, oh yeah, Italian culture. Like, the reason that they're open to new experiences is because they're Italian. It's not entirely sufficient, though. What we need to think about is why, right? Why might there be differences between Italian people and Korean people? One thing we might turn to is theories related to different systems of beliefs or values. We might look at uncertainty avoidance as a value and see if these cultures vary in uncertainty avoidance. And what we might find is, oh, maybe in Italy, people have a lower threshold on this. They're more open to new experiences because they're more tolerant of ambiguity. They have less avoidance of uncertainty. Whereas people in Korea, again, totally made up, maybe they have high anxiety and stress around uncertainty. And therefore, in their culture, everything is more rigid and structured, and they tend to avoid uncertain things. And maybe that is why you see this difference in openness to new experiences. So, the main takeaway here is basically instead of starting with this question, do cultures differ? Or I should say, instead of ending with this question, that the key question we should be asking is why do cultural differences exist if we find them?